Hi everybody, welcome back to Roleplay Chat. I'm Matt, a game master who cannot stop talking about role-playing games, and boy am I excited to start Season 6 of Roleplay Chat. I know it's been a little while since the show's been up and running, but I've got some awesome episodes recorded already and geared up to go for this season of Roleplay Chat. In today's episode, we're going to be talking to Jordan of Goosepoop Games as we talk about all kinds of GMless games. Jordan is a fantastic game designer and has some incredible insights to share about running and creating GMless tabletop role-playing games. We also have the return of the Indie Showcase segment, where we're going to have a spotlighted TTRPG created by independent groups, small, sometimes, one-person teams, other times, small independent companies making role-playing games. So the TTRPG Indie Showcase for today's episode is Heir of Swords. You're going to hear from Yanni, its creator, at about the half-hour mark in today's episode. I think it's about 25 minutes into today's episode. But anyway, I'm really glad to be back. Roleplay Chat is back. And I hope you enjoy today's episode, and I hope you follow along for the rest of the season, if not, if you aren't already. Anyhow, enjoy the show. Glad to be back, and let's do it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Roleplay Chat. I'm Matt, a game master who can't stop talking about role-playing games, and today we are going to be talking about GMless games. It's a topic that has been kind of near and dear to my heart for quite some time. I love playing GMless games, especially when I don't have time to prepare for my home game. But they come with their own challenges for sure. So I'm hoping today we can dissect that a little bit. And I'm honored to be joined today by a game designer, a writer, an illustrator in the TTRPG space, creating board games and TTRPGs that you might be familiar with, like Good Soup, the Choosy Goosey, Big Stretch, Pigeon Chess, Lemons, and many, many more. Please welcome Jordan to Roleplay Chat. And the crowd goes wild. How's it going, Jordan?
Good. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So before we dive too deep into GMless games, why don't I pass the microphone over to you to kind of add to the introduction? Let us know, who you are in the space, where they can find your stuff, and why they should be listening to your advice regarding GMless games.
Yeah, I'm Jordan. I run my own studio called Goosepoop Games. You can find me on all the socials at Goosepoop207. I am always working on games. And speaking of GMless games, I'm releasing a one on Kickstarter called Warped FM. I don't know when you're gonna release this episode. When were you planning to release this episode?
Um, it might not be for another month or so, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, if you're listening to this in Marchish, it'll be you can late back it. So don't worry,
Perfect.
you won't miss it. Yeah, so that one, Warped FM, you are running your own podcast interviewing creatures from other dimensions. Just like you're doing, Matt, interviewing game
I
designers,
love it.
which are
I love
from
it.
other dimensions.
That kind of reminds me of that show, the Magic Tavern or whatever. Did
Yeah,
you ever
Hello
listen to
from the
that?
Magic Tavern. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was
that
that a
was
source
really
of
good.
inspiration for you?
Yeah, that was one of them. And then another one was Midnight Gospel, and then Very Important People from Dropout and
Ooh,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good
So those
time.
were all kind of like my inspirations to just be really silly. It's
I
mainly
love it.
improv. Yeah.
I love it. Well, yeah, so it'll definitely be a link for folks listening in the show notes of today's episode, so you can all go find Goose Poop Games. You can also go find the Kickstarter that Jordan mentioned, Warped FM. Is that what you said it was called?
Yep. Warped FM.
So that'll all be linked up for folks to go take a look. And depending on when this releases, you can late back it, like Jordan mentioned. So hopefully I can try to make that happen for you, Jordan.
Yeah, no rush, whatever. It's just, funding the birth of a game. Not
No,
important.
no
What
pressure.
is no importance whatsoever.
Yeah,
No, it's my
yeah,
first
yeah.
Kickstarter. The goal is super low because I am scared. And just
I've
like
heard kickstarting
it's
things
it's
is
intense.
quite a challenge. Definitely a challenge. So I hope it's
Um,
not. I hope it hasn't been too hard for you.
yeah, it's fun. It's fun work. I mean, I love all aspects of game making, so
Amazing,
fun.
amazing.
Yeah.
And so Warped FM is a GMless game, and I think that that might be part of the inspiration also for today's conversation being about GMless games. So perhaps for the uninitiated, for people who might be hearing the terms GMless game for the first time, I mean, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but can you give it a bit of a description of what that's like, what playing a GMless game is, and why it's a fun time?
Yeah, so GMless game, there's no game master. So there's no one person who is like um playing as non-playable characters or like cuz like in GM'd games like are everybody's favorite Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm,
You have their the workload is put on one person to kind of know the rules and run the session. They have like a big screen around them and they got their own secrets and stuff and they're creating a story for you. But in GMless games, you're all creating a story at the same time together. So, I mean, that's kind of you can do some it's still that term is still like applicable to GM'd games where you're making a story together, but
yeah, totally.
it's not as like focused or prepared is the sense. And so like a lot of GMless games are they're like kind of based on more like the story itself is based on chance. So there's like a theme and then like what happens is not determined by like a single person. It's kind of everybody is working
Yeah,
together.
yeah, and for me, whenever I play a GMless game, it's usually because I'm either unprepared to do anything else, or I kind of get like this feeling of like I want to just tell a story right now. It's far more fun to tell a story with my friends than it is to tell a story all by myself because no one's listening and no one's there to enjoy the like process of doing it other than me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's like authors listening to this being like, I tell stories to myself all the time. And I mean, sure, but you're writing a book. That's different. It's not
Yeah.
the same thing. So absolutely. And I want to kind of circle back to something you said about how it's not one person making the decisions. I think that that's kind of like a critical component about GMless games that are a lot of fun, right? It's
Mhm.
we're all making these decisions together. I suppose the same could be said about some tables playing GM'd games, but there's still kind of like that de facto person who has a little bit more narrative control than anybody else, right? Whereas
Yeah,
in a GMless game, that's it's kind of washed away for the most part.
right. Yeah, you're almost like everybody is relying on the system of the game that is
Hmm.
for the narrative stuff to happen. But
Absolutely.
compared to like everybody's relying on a person to do the game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so outside of that element, which I think is super critical, when you play a GMless game, Jordan, what are you getting out of it? Like that you can't perhaps get out of playing a standard traditional GTRPG.
Um what I really enjoy is kind of the everybody has almost an equal amount of narrative control on the thing. So like I really like the idea of, oh, but what if this happened? Well, and then it does happen
Mm.
because there's no GM to say, no, this is how the world is and blah blah blah. It's like, oh no, yeah, I guess everybody's like, yeah, I guess that happens. and so, and so the whole thing is like a yes and I just really like that. I usually just come up with crazy things on the spot. Um but also I think um the feeling of creating something together, it depends on the GMless game, honestly. I mean, there's so many different kinds. Um like so there's a little bit less defined GMless games like one of my favorites, I mean two of my favorites are Microscope is
Mm.
really great and The Quiet Year are both like really great. Microscope I really like because it's you can zoom in or out of a timeline and you're all just kind of going around telling like different eras in this timeline. And so people can like hyper fixate on like one area and then you could just be like, nah, and then there was the dawn of the cheese. There's that's it. We just write dawn of the cheese on the note card and that's a new era in the timeline. Everybody's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I guess that was the cheese era.
I love it. Yeah, I've played Microscope a handful of times, actually, as like a world building exercise
Right.
for a system, like for a Fate core game that we were gonna play. So just to kind of build on what you're saying, 100%. It's such a fun way to tell stories collectively. It's such a fun way to like all own equal parts
Mhm.
of what you're doing and to own the parts you want. Like, like someone comes up with the dawn of the cheese era, and that's not really jiving with me. That's fine. I can just start creating content for a different era or for a
Yeah.
different like whatever. We can all pick and choose our fun and kind of mix it all together and see what comes out of the grab bag at the end. Um, so I agree 100% with what you're saying. I will say that there are a lot of, like you were saying, there's a lot of different kinds of GMless games. And you were talking about before we started recording that you have like a list of some of your favorites. I'd love to hear what some of your favorite GMless games are.
Okay. So Quiet Year and Microscope were both the my I think my very first GMless game was The Quiet Year. And I
Okay.
think what made that I played that during COVID when we had the everything was shut down and stuff. So I
Mm.
was just alone in a house and streaming with a friend, and we did it in the I think probably the worst way possible. You could play it. There's like jam boards or whatever that exist so people could draw on it. It's like, no, I just
Yeah,
had my notebook and I drew it and then I held it up to the camera. It's like, is that good? He's like, yeah, that's exactly
yeah,
what I
yeah.
was
And
thinking.
it's like not focusing, and you're like
Yeah.
trying to get it to.
Yeah. But I mean, we played like I don't know, 3 or 4 hours straight and we just like sat back and was like, yeah, that was just really good. And we like and it felt complete, we just had our own little story and I think I like reflect on it, but it's also almost like playing jazz in a way where it's like
Mm.
improvising and stuff where you're like, wow, that moment was really good. I'll never be able to recreate that experience, but like that was a really cool experience that I had with the game. Um
I love that you say you're right. It's very much like you're just jamming. You're just jamming and role playing, and like it happens. And part of the beauty of it is it's like ephemera, like how you'll never get there again. That
right.
happened once and it's gone forever. I love it. I love it. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Please keep going.
Okay. Um Yeah, let's see. So the other GMless game that I really enjoyed was Goblin Quest. Um, from the person who made like Honey Heist and yeah, it's Grant Howitt. Yeah. So Goblin Quest, um it's interesting because it's a GM-less game, but he like fleshed out the story with it, and then he also had other designers create um kind of basically storylines
Mm,
for the setting. So he created the setting and then he asked some other designers to like, hey, come up with this like storyline. And so the whole idea with goblins is that they're all just like birthed from ooze and they're
okay,
all
cool.
just like yeah. they're like the dumbest things because
Yeah,
they were just
little
born.
goop
Yeah, they're
monsters.
like little goop boys. Um and so the idea is that you're like you only have one kind of hit point in a way, but you have like five lives. So but it's not like it's the same person each time. It's like once you get hit, just another person from the gelatinous ooze comes out and joins your crew. And so then you have to like remake your whole character again, which is super fast and really silly.
Yeah, yeah.
Um though the thing I enjoyed about that game was it had a system where you each had like a token of a sense and you use that token to do an action. So you can all
Mm,
describe like what's happening, but um you play the token and you're like, "Oh, I play the token and I'm going to go talk to that orc to try to get his chicken." And
mm,
that kind of thing.
cool.
And so I used a bit of that mechanic for my game Good Soup, um, where you all kind of have that like way of passing the torch, you know? Um, and but the what's different in Good Soup is that the person to like the left of you or the last person who took an action is basically a GM. They're telling
Mm,
you what's happening in the world. And I found that to be like people really enjoyed that because they were just it was almost like everybody was a GM at that
yeah,
point. Yeah. So everybody I like one time when I was play testing it was all GMs and everybody was like, "Man, this is great. I love all of this." Cuz we're all just like telling stories to each other and taking turns and stuff. So um
yeah. When you think of like the nomenclature of GMless game, I feel like in some instances it would almost be more appropriate to call it like all GM's game as opposed to GMless because really
right.
that's what's happening, right? Is for the most part everybody's taking on the responsibility of telling this story together. We're all just passing the ball around, waiting to like lay somebody up for the slam, like for the dunk or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agreed 100%. It's a cool way that you've mechanicized it though in Good Soup. That's really fun.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I think it feels a little better to call it GM-less because I think it's more approachable in that way
Perhaps, yeah.
because people would be like, "Oh, I don't have to find someone or I don't have to dedicate a lot of time for this." Like, there are other games where they're basically GM-less. They just need maybe a facilitator to help push things along.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like there's Alice is Missing is another one. Um, because I never really thought of it kind of as GMless, but it is basically GMless. It's just there's one player who like kind of knows how to play the game, so they're gonna kind of push things along a little bit
Yeah,
more.
they help like facilitate it to a certain degree.
Right. But everybody's still kind of on the same level of like creating the story together, you know. There's nobody that's like, no, that can't happen in this world kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um
yeah, for sure.
and then I recently played this um Yaziba's Bed and Breakfast. That's like basically GMless. Like they even say in the book, it's like you can play as characters as well. You're just like,
Hmm.
if you have the book, you're also probably gonna like make sure the rules are good, but there's barely any rules.
Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, as far as for me, I mean, I haven't played that many GM-less games, and usually when like the itch, when I have that itch, the go-to for my group is always to play Fiasco. Um,
Right? Yeah, that was the other
Fiasco
one I was gonna mention.
is a really
Yeah.
good time. It does sometimes suffer from like this like blank page syndrome where if you're not all in the mood to tell a story, it can be a little bit tricky to kind of make it come out of
Mm.
nowhere. Like it really feels like sometimes you're pushing for it to come out. But maybe we can talk about some solutions to that in a little bit. Before we cut to break, though, Jordan, are there any other GM-less games that you wanted to mention for people listening, for the uninitiated?
Well, you said Fiasco, and then also Iron Sworn. It's
Oh,
also
Ironsworn.
another good one.
Good call. Good call. All right, so we'll let people listening stew on that for a bit. We're gonna jump away for the indie showcase, uh, and you'll be hearing from the creator of the indie game spotlighted in today's episode, and then we'll jump back to Jordan and I. So stick around, stay tuned.
Hello, everyone. I'm Yanni Panagiotopoulou. I'm a concept artist and tabletop RPG designer, and I really appreciate Matt giving me the opportunity to come and talk about my game, Heir of Swords. Heir of Swords is a game about trauma and grief. It's about reliving the same moment over and over again in your head, the moment where you lost what was important. You are playing a character known as the Heir of Swords, a character that has already lost a lot, that is currently struggling with their grief. And you are journeying into a forest in which you find rumination, reliving your past traumas, all desperately in search for your heart. You are heartless and you're desperately looking for what was taken from you. Inside the forest, you may find your heart, but even if you do, the grief has kind of changed you fundamentally. That the emptiness that you are existing with right now is something that will never go away. And in the forest is your enemy, the one who betrayed you, the one who caused the suffering that you are feeling. And in this journey, you are kind of recontextualizing your narrative, recontextualizing your trauma, recontextualizing your self archetype through tarot. Heir of Swords has three primary inspirations. The first one is like a restriction inspiration. I made this game for Binary Star Games minimalism TTRPG jam, and this was a very challenging for me because the restrictions of this jam were my comfort zone. You can't use art, you can't use layout. It has to be kind of like a single format, with only headings, body text, and lists. So that kind of like took a lot of my tools as a designer that I like to use a lot away. And I wanted to make a game that was very rich in mechanics and rich in prose. So I tried to make it so that every sentence is communicating both of those at the same time as an excuse to to shape the kind of story that I want people to be feeling during. And I hope that impression comes across while playing it. The second big inspiration for Heir of Swords is tarot. I think tarot is a really, really interesting kind of way of self archetyping. And I wanted to use tarot in a way that I don't see being used a lot in TTRPG spaces. I feel like a lot of tarot content is about basically its position as a deck, but there is a lot to tarot that connects to kind of like a collective unconscious self archetype. You can recontextualize past or future events through changing fate with a tarot deck. And one of the ways that is very common to do that is through spreads. So I wanted to see if I could find a way to use tarot spreads to communicate a lot of my core ideas for this game, kind of sense of choicelessness, reliving grief and trauma over and over again. And I think I did a really, really good job with that too. And then the third, the kind of tonal inspiration for this game, in my larger game Ambition, I have one of the player archetypes is called the deserter, and there's an expression for that called heartless. And the visual, tonal, narrative motifs of the heartless is something that I was very attached to, and it felt very rich. And I wanted to make almost like a kind of sub character creator for that archetype, somebody that can only wield the weapons they wield because they don't have a heart, that anybody with a heart wouldn't be able to do the things that they did. So this is kind of like the heartless story. It's the story of how somebody kind of winds up in a position like that. So mechanically, I kind of actually want to talk about a little bit of the behind the scenes. Heir of Swords is a really fun experimental project for me. So a lot of these questions are geared towards talking about Heir of Swords as a product, and I kind of want to talk a little bit more past that. I want to talk about a little bit of like kind of the mechanical behind the scenes stuff decisions I made that I thought were interesting, because everybody can go on my itch. You could pick up Heir of Swords. It's not something I charge for. I appreciate the attention, and I hope you guys all like it. But I think this is a much cooler space to talk about some of the mechanical stuff. So with Heir of Swords specifically, the challenge that I was running into is that as a tarot spread, right, there's like two layers of meaning that are happening. There's the meaning intrinsic to a tarot card, right? The Chariot always means something. The Nine of Swords always means something. So I wanted to basically hook into that meaning so that I didn't have to do an elaborate set of like contextual rules and lists that kept the game slim and kept it a little more accessible to a lot of people. It's already hooking onto a lot of cultural symbols. So the cards themselves mean what a tarot card means, right? And the process by which the cards mean something to the game is how the final spread looks at the end of the game. So in Heir of Swords, you are making the Hermit's Guidance. It's a 7-card spread that is going to basically describe the internal trauma and grief of the heartless as they go through the forest and they either do or don't find their lover, and they do or don't kill their adversary. So the meaning that the tarot cards take on is dependent on two things mechanically. It's dependent on their position in the spread. So there's 7 positions, all of them have a name, and they kind of become roles for each card to inhabit. And then depending on the kind of conditions of the game, right? So the Heartless is looking for their lovers. They want their lovers to be in the lantern. If you end the game with the lovers in the lantern, you find your heart, and you have a different set of contextual meanings than if you don't find your lovers. Same if you wind up striking down your adversary. So that's like the core function of Heir of Swords. So why should you pick up Heir of Swords? I think you should pick up Heir of Swords because it's a really interesting little experimental piece on how to use tarot spreads as a game mechanic. A lot of my current work right now, I'm doing a lot of this in Ambition behind the scenes, and I did it with Heir of Swords and another RPG I made called Majula. There is more out there to use as a tabletop RPG designer from the meaning that we have assigned to objects. They're not just random number generators, and tarot spreads are really a really cool way to get meaning out of ordering story archetype. So if you want to see a little experiment with that, that'd be cool. If you want a really interesting character generator for giving a really rich, engaged backstory that's based on archetype, so it makes it a little system transcendent on kind of like a trauma filled, grief-ridden character, somebody that carries a heavy aura to them, you can generate a very quick story for whatever character you want to play in about like 10 minutes. And it's going to give you a lot of context on your past. It's going to give you a lot of context on how you act in the future. It's going to give you a lot of like hooks into whatever world you decide to put them in. The really beautiful thing about tarot and archetype is that they're really transcendent. They are appealing to a kind of shared vernacular of story that almost everyone is familiar with. So when you abstract a lot of Heir of Swords out into those archetypes and you answer those questions, they're very easy to map into whatever specific name, setting, place, whatever. Heir of Swords is intentionally trying to kind of create narrative pathways that are broad enough to be transcendent through setting and set dressing. Also, if you want to support me doing cool stuff, that's another really good reason to get Heir of Swords. But I hope you guys enjoy my little experimental TTRPG. And I hope that it inspires some designers to try things with spreads in the future. There is so much richness with kind of like tarot and numbers in order and archetypes that are very story rich, maybe not very mechanically rich, but I'm very interested into seeing what other people can do with tools like that. I wanted to thank Matt again for letting me talk about my game, Heir of Swords. If you like what you were listening to and you want to see more, my name is Yanni Panagiotopoulos. I go by the Urban Avian, and my itch.io is the Press Betwixt. I just published a game called Fragmented Memories, a little setting guide, and I'm working on a large-scale Taoist tabletop RPG called Ambition. Thank you guys so much for listening.
Thank you, Yanni, for being on Roleplay Chat and introducing us to your wonderful game, Heir of Swords. It is indeed a fun time, and before we jump back to the regular scheduled programming of today's episode, I wanted to let the listeners know my thoughts on Heir of Swords. Now, to kind of add some caveats to what Yanni mentioned, Heir of Swords is indeed a solo TTRPG game, and if you're somebody who enjoys those journaling types, self-reflective, introspective games, Heir of Swords is going to be something that you're going to like. If that's not something that's, sounds interesting to you, you might have a little bit less of a fun time playing. The second caveat that I'm going to add in here is that Heir of Swords does kind of come packed in with this, I don't want to call it quite a requirement, but there's definitely an advantage if you're playing Heir of Swords and understand tarot cards, understand how to read tarot cards, understand their hidden meaning, and kind of, the nomenclature and verbiage of using tarot cards. I myself am somebody who's still kind of learning the ins and outs of tarot. It's not something that I would consider myself to be innately apt at. And so when I was playing Heir of Swords, I gave it 2 tries, and both times lasted about 25 minutes because I needed to kind of, look stuff up a little bit and make sure I was understanding things properly and reading the cards properly. So because I didn't have that, we'll call it innate knowledge or understanding of the cards, I did feel like my experience wasn't quite as good as it could have been. Now, this doesn't go to say that it was a bad experience. I want to make sure that that's clear. I still had a lot of fun playing Heir of Swords, but I felt like I could have unlocked a deeper understanding of the game and been able to craft even better narratives if I had that baseline understanding of tarot, be a little bit more, if I was a bit more of an expert, let's say, in reading tarot cards and things like that. So, if you listening to today's episode are somebody who likes tarot and likes narrative self-exploration games, 100% Heir of Swords is for you. You're going to want to go check that out. There's going to be a link in the show notes for today's episodes. And like Yanni mentioned, the game is pay what you would like. So you can download the game and make a financial contribution that, matches your current financial situation. Thanks again, Yanni, for being on the show, and we'll get back to the regular scheduled programming. Bye, everybody. And we're back. Hope you go check out the Indie Showcase. It'll be linked in the show notes of today's episode. Go check it out. Go buy it. Support indie games. They're the best. And so let's maybe now switch and put our advice hat on, if you're comfortable with that, Jordan.
Sure.
I did a little bit of snooping around on the internet and found some advice from other people. So I'm going to say that advice, and then I'd love to hear your position on whether you agree with that advice, you disagree with that advice, if you have like
It's
another
all terrible. You listen to me now. You youngsters making your silly games. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, but you know what, actually, Jordan, this wasn't one that I found, but now that you talk about it, I mean, you've created GMless games, so why don't we start there? Do you have advice for people listening on what kind of thing to do? Like, how is it different creating a GMless game from creating, the systems of a quote unquote traditional TTRPG?
You have to figure out a way to encourage creativity within the players.
Mm.
I kind of call it like breadcrumbing is what I do. So like in terms of like my game Good Soup, I don't have a terrible amount of world building in it. And it's all for a reason because I want to see what you come up with.
Mm-hmm.
There's just like there's a map, and they got some spots, but I don't describe anything on the map. There's no just. I mean, I say like different. It's like this is the campsite and this is the Royal Observatory. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, you guys figure it
Just
out.
yeah, you figure it out. Um, but and then the roll tables are like just random. Like one of my favorite things is a summer troll. I don't know what that is. Are they on vacation? Are
Yeah,
they
they got the
wearing like
sunglasses and
trunks?
like
Yeah. Do they have that like the white splotch on their nose of sunscreen and
yeah,
stuff? Are they
yeah, I love
tanning?
it.
Um, but
Giant
yeah, my
flip-flops, you know, with like their big
yeah.
crusty toes sticking out. Anyway.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, so like all the roll tables are kind of like in that sense where there's just enough to kind of get the player's mind to kind of think of like, oh, what is this? Like,
Mm,
where is this going? And how does this connect to the world? And what makes it nice with the GMless game is like whatever connection they make is kind of a positive thing. Like it can happen, you know?
mhm,
Um, and I mean, there can be debate on the table of like what exactly is a summer troll or like what they're doing and stuff. But yeah, the breadcrumbing in the sense of encouraging creativity is like giving them enough so like you were talking about it earlier. It's like the blank page problem with Fiasco, where
mhm.
if you just go up to somebody who's like, "Ooh, I love games and I love improv and whatever," you just slap a blank piece of paper and a pencil on it. It's like, "All right, have fun. There you go."
Yeah.
They'll just be
Make something
stuck there
funny.
like,
Let's go.
uh, what do you mean? So it's like there's one, like, loose quote I love from Igor Stravinsky, talking about, like, um, the most creative things come from, uh, when you have the tightest kind of rule set almost,
Mm,
but,
yeah. Or like the limitations
the
sometimes.
limitations, yes. Within limitations, there's creativity,
Yeah,
something like that. I'm
totally.
paraphrasing, but, like, yeah, so the
I'm pretty sure
where it's
that's
like
exactly verbatim
that's
what they said, yeah.
exactly like it. Within limitations, there's creativity. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the idea where it's like you got to give them some kind of boundary to
Mm,
like play in. Um, like that's why the map isn't like super detailed, but it's enough where it's like, yeah, it's a thing there.
yeah,
It's not gonna be a different thing because there's already something there, you know? So, but, it allows it's also another goes along the thought of, like, it's so much easier to criticize than create, you know?
totally.
Yeah, so instead of, like, creating something new, it's easier to tell someone, it's like, "No, you should change that part of it,"
Yeah,
instead of, like,
100%.
creating an entire game.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think that the same rings true like in all fields, you know, regardless
Right,
of game design or public speaking or making
right.
a movie, whatever, any kind of endeavor where you're creating something. It's far easier to critique it than it is to create it out of a blank space. Um, but I think you're right. I think having rules in your game that sort of I like that terminology, breadcrumb, that kind of like propose a direction, propose answers to some of these questions, right? Who, what, where, when. That kind of stuff might be helpful for somebody when they're trying to use it as a springboard for what they're going to be creating in the game.
Right.
Um, yeah, yeah. So I think that that's definitely important. Do you feel like your creative process when you're making these games, you're kind of like trying to check that stuff off of like a list, kind of?
Well, I mean, so when I'm thinking of a game and making a game, I'm thinking about how I'm visualizing what it looks like to play the game. Like,
Hmm.
people are at a table, or are they all just sitting on our like their couch and hanging out? Like, for the good soup, I imagine everybody's just sitting on their couch eating a bowl of soup, and they're all just chatting around the coffee table or whatever in their living room. That's the ideal setting. So
Mhm.
and then the other thing is like picturing how you want the game to feel for those players and how you want the game to progress. Um
Mm.
So like with the breadcrumbing, you already kind of said it. It's like, yeah, I'm kind of leading you in a kind of way that I think is the ideal way of playing, for
Okay.
the
Yeah.
most enjoyment. So I'm gonna kind of like nudge you in that kind of direction. I mean, it's still pretty open-ended. That's the beauty about TTRPGs.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
but it's like I have an idea, like I have a feeling that you're gonna like the game this kind of way, so I'm gonna try to give you little piece of candy, just like a little piece of candy to
Yeah.
guide you on the way that I think is
Amazing.
the silliest and the fun kind of way.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I mean, who better to do that than the person who's made, like, you're making the game, like you said, with a certain vision. So definitely there's going to be certain elements of the game that if you explore that element of the game, it's going to be more fun. Uh, or
mhm.
at least there is a higher likelihood of fun occurring, right? If you get to those parts of the game. I,
Yeah,
I like that. I like that a lot. Um, one thing we talked about the blank page problem a little bit, and I love the breadcrumbing as a solution for people designing games. But what about for people playing GMless games? Maybe somebody's listening to this, they've never played a GMless game before, and they worry about not being able to come up with something on the spot that's interesting enough,
yeah.
or something like that in one of these role play scenes. They don't feel inspired enough, perhaps. What kind of advice would you give to somebody like that? Or I can start with the advice that I found online, and you can tell me if you agree with it. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. So the advice was on rpgnet.com. And here and again, I'm paraphrasing because I'm not going to like read out a whole article to people listening, but the crux of what was said in this article was that people playing GMless games that are worrying about the blank page problem should spend more time establishing their scenes out of character before jumping into anything. So if you can explain where you are, who you are, and what you're trying to resolve in the scene ahead of time, then it's going to be easier for you to role play it. I don't know if I agree with that, but I think it's certainly advice that exists and might be valuable. What do you think? What's your gut reaction to that, Jordan?
I think um I think in some sense that I agree with it. Uh, the only worry I have is that it makes it so the some of the GMless games are very like plug and play, kind of like just on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Where that advice kind of is saying like, oh, take more time as a backstory thing and generate that. I mean, in my Warped FM game, I also have you just answer like 5 questions,
Mm-hmm.
and then you do a little bit of roll tables as your personality and stuff. So I can understand like having it just gives you as the player like more material to work off of. Um, but if you're worried about kind of I think that the biggest worry and the blank page problem is the aspect of improv, where it's like I just don't know how to suddenly come up with just off the cuff things. Like me as my own person, as Jordan, I'm really good off the cuff. Like that's how I do most of things. I could never be like a stand-up comedian, but like I'm really good at just like quips and whatever. But I would say advice is like don't worry too much about creating something brand new.
Mm,
Have a reference base for what you know. So like if I'm um reading a book that I've been enjoying lately, maybe I kind of like slide the personalities of the main character into my character. And so now I have a little bit of something to work off of. And now it doesn't feel as scary because I know that character enough that I can just
hmm.
kind of be that kind of personality trait.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I feel like often the more obscure a place is where you can borrow ideas, the more creative you appear to be. So definitely,
Yeah.
if you're reading a book, if you're watching a TV show, or you're playing a video game, why not borrow
Yeah, why
content
not?
from that stuff? Especially if it's just you and your friends playing a game at home. Like, who cares?
Yeah. I
uh,
mean, and then going off of like the creativity stuff is um like a lot of creative media is just stuff like we've taken and then tweaked a little bit to make
hmm.
our own thing. So why not just take a character from whatever? You take Ash Ketchum for Pokemon and then you tweak him a little bit and then you're different. You're your
You're,
own thing, but like you just use some elements of that. No one's gonna
and
care or
and like 9 times out of 10, no one's gonna even notice, right?
notice.
Like people people have a hard time when you don't have all of the additional context clues to be able to identify that, oh, that's Ash Ketchum, or that's like there was a game master I had on the show a pretty long time ago who works for Monty Cook with Monty Cook Games, and
Yeah.
he was talking about how he was playing a game with his friends for like a year and a half, and then at the end of the game, they were like, "Wow, this is the such a great story. How did you come up with it?" And the game master was like, "It's just Hamlet. Like I literally just copied Hamlet
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
no,
way
you
through."
did.
Like all the NPCs, everything is the story beats the whole thing, and nobody caught on. And so
That's
you
great.
could be surprised with what you could pull off. Definitely. Awesome, awesome. So another piece of advice that I found on the internet about GMless games has to do with a common problem that's referred to as the black box problem, where apparently, and this was on blackarmada.com, where they talk about how in GMless games, it can be problematic if players continuously create these situations where they make a problem or a mystery without an end. So there's a black box and you
Mm.
don't know what's in the black box because there's an NPC and they're very mysterious and maybe they stole something, but you put that out there into existence and assume someone is going to resolve it for you, and then it kind of fizzles away and doesn't get resolved. Um, their recommendation for for a for kind of dealing with this is to just not do it. They just recommend just don't do black boxes, period, because you're setting yourself up for failure. And I have an opinion about that because I love the black boxes. I think they're the most fun thing to do and see what my friends can come up with as a solution. But I
Yeah.
do agree that like, yeah, sometimes some of them aren't going to get resolved. So anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Sure.
I think that's a funny solution. I was about to say, I was like, I'm pretty sure I just backed one of the Kickstarters for Zine Quest where it's GMless mystery. I'm like, that
That's
is
what it's
just
called.
that's exactly that. It's a GMless black box game. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know how they resolve it. But I mean, as I mean, if you couldn't tell by my company name, or the games I make is I just love absurdity. So like having just a mystery and then people be like All right, well, something completely different. We're just never gonna address that. Like very Wes Anderson style. I was like, God, I love that. I don't.
Yeah,
It's
let's move
like
on.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
um, or like I love like short stories and like writing like little short stories. And the what makes a great short story is that it ends on like a cliffhanger or whatever. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I understand that annoys people, but like I kind of like enjoy that beauty of like, oh, well, we may never know.
Exactly.
And that's
I
kind of the fun thing. And
totally.
then, well, I mean, what can be actually great if you're doing the black box thing is after you're done with the game, you and your friends are just kind of chatting what was in the black box. I don't know. And
Hmm.
then that elongates your enjoyment and memory of the game. You're gonna remember that game more because you had the black box.
Yeah,
So, I don't
I
know.
like
I
that a lot.
I guess my TLDR is I don't agree with that person. Make little random secrets and then
Yeah,
answer
exactly. I think
answer
I
them
think
in your own.
perhaps it's like a mindset thing, right? Because if you go into it comfortable that if I create a black box, maybe we're never going to find out what's inside, then you're at peace with that happening. Whereas if it's the other way around, if you're creating a black box with the expectation that someone else on playing the game is going to pick up, eh, first of all, pick up on the fact that you're creating a black box, and
Right,
second
yeah.
of all, take the initiative to like resolve it for you, you might find yourself disappointed if it doesn't happen. So just kind of go into it with that expectation of like, ooh, we'll see if anybody does anything with this, and if not,
Yeah.
whatever, who
Yeah,
cares?
I'd
Like,
be okay with it. Yeah. I
yeah.
think after playing a lot of games, you kind of start being okay with like, yeah, as long as we have fun,
Hmm.
as long as in the moment it was a good time, that's kind of the epitome of a good game. Not just like, do we check off all the boxes and find all the tallies and get all the points? It's like, who cares?
Yeah,
And
yeah, totally.
I mean, I put that mentality in my games. I'm like for the Warped FM and for Good Soup, I'm like, there's a roll table if you want it. If you
Yeah,
got a better idea, go for it. The roll
have
tables are
at it.
just there if you like you're like brain dead right now and you can't think of anything. So you roll. But like if you got something in mind, why should I stop you?
Hmm.
If it's like you're excited about it and you know that you're gonna have a good time if your character's gonna be this certain way, go ahead. I don't care.
Fantastic. I love it. I love it. So I'm looking at the clock, and we're about at that time to kind of close out the show. So before we do that, Jordan, I want to pass the microphone over to you to do kind of two things. The first, of course, is to let us know, remind us where we can find all of your games, where people can back your Kickstarter, stuff like that. And then the second thing I'd like to ask of you is if anybody listening has made it this far and is still unsure of whether or not they want to play a GMless game, what can you say to that person to convince them uh, to give it a go?
Oh, I know the thing to convince him. You don't have to you don't have to wait forever to get a group together to play a GMless game. No one has to learn I mean, somebody's gonna have to learn the rules. How else are you gonna learn it? But no, you don't have to wait for someone to come up with all these crazy characters or take forever. You can just
Mm,
be like, oh, we're all in this room together. Hey, I have this game. Let's play right now. And then you just play it. You
yeah.
don't have to turn it into a quote unquote event. It can just be, oh, we're playing a game. Uh, really quick. Don't have to spend months planning it out. That's the benefit. And then yeah, you can find me on all of the socials at goosepoop207. And then goosepoopgames.com is where all my games are at. You can also find me on itch and stuff if that feels more comfortable to you. Um, and Warped FM is coming out, maybe already out in late pledge. Or depending on how late it is, you may see another game on Kickstarter, Froggy Finance. We'll see.
Perfect.
I mean, I don't care. That's the next game coming out after this, and that's going to be a card game where you play as business frogs, earning money to hire more business frogs.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, thank you, Jordan, for being here to talk to us about your games and about GMless Games. I definitely recommend that everybody listening go take a good look at Goosepoop Games. The links, like I mentioned, will be in the show notes for today's episode. Go pledge, go play some fun games, and what better GMless game to get started with than some of Jordan's? So please go check them out. And with that, I guess we'll call it a chat. So thanks, Jordan, and have a good rest of your night.
Yeah, have a great one, everyone. Thanks for having me. So happy
Love
to be
it.
here.
All right, bye everybody. Let's call it a chat. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of today's episode, friends. If you made it all the way here, you are one of the true MVPs of the Roleplay Chat audience. The other MVPs of the Roleplay Chat audience are the Patreon subscribers who are supporting me through their subscription on Patreon. I'd like to thank Domil's Wondrous Works and Jason over at Shadowmane. Thanks to the two of you for supporting me. Your support allows me to continue to make this show. If you wanted to join them, you're welcome to do so by going onto Patreon and looking for Roleplay Chat. There's also a link down in the show notes. There you can subscribe to the show, where you can get access to the episodes as soon as they're done, as well as extended episodes depending on the tier that you subscribe to. You can also support the show without spending money. You can do that by reviewing the show, spreading the good word, and sharing the show with your friends. If you do that, it really helps to broaden the reach of Roleplay Chat. Recommendations, personal recommendations, and word of mouth really are one of the number one ways for the podcast to be discovered. Also, if you're looking to buy some new tabletop RPG stuff, like dice, miniatures, or new games and rules and supplements, the show notes have links to affiliate links. So if you were to buy things using those affiliate links, for instance, the indie showcase that was spotlighted in today's episode, you can purchase it there, sometimes at a discount too, depending on the link, and a small kickback comes back to me. So yeah, check all that stuff out. The show notes has a handful of links there, things like Hero Forge, Drive-Thru RPG, some awesome dice makers and things like of that nature. So go check it out, and yeah, thanks again for making it all the way here. And one last thank you to Alex and Chase over at Pocket Bard for allowing me to use their music for the intro and outro of Roleplay Chat.